Stephen King banned one of his own books, and he did it for the wrong reason. Because his book, in this case, it was Raged, published way back in 1977, exposes a societal issue that affects young guys. Okay. Now, what it is, the story about a young guy who became a school shooter due to abuse from his father. So what's King's solution to this? Let's not deal with the source of the problem. Let me just take my book down because it might trigger these guys, right? So King is a part of the problem and not the solution. Matter of fact, we will get into the story of Rage. We'll borrow this guy's video. He talks about the story right here.
The story of Rage centers around a high school senior at Placerville High by the name of Charlie Decker, who we are first introduced to as he is pulled out of an algebra class to speak to the school principal on an incident in which Decker assaulted a teacher with a pipe wrench, almost killing him. As Decker laughs off the principal's attempt at disciplining him, he makes his way back to class, but not before stopping in his locker, grabbing a pistol and lighting the locker itself on fire. And on re-entry into the classroom, Decker is asked a question by the algebra teacher, Mrs. Jean Underwood, to which he responds by shooting her in the face, killing her instantly. From here, Rage primarily takes place within the algebra classroom, as Decker holds the students hostage. The story is also interspersed with flashbacks that consist mostly of examples of Decker's abusive father and the events leading up to his decision to shoot up the school.
There you go. So King is, of course, exposing a real societal ill. This book should not be taken down.
However, what makes Rage interesting is how the classroom of students all begin to sympathise and even identify with Decker, and in response they all bond by sharing sad and embarrassing stories about themselves in some weird group therapy session.
It's not a weird group therapy session, it's a group therapy session, right? So King's novel shows empathy towards the young guy who produces this school shooting, right? He gets to the core of what motivates him and why he acted out the way he did. So this is actually a boon to society, this book. What's King's reaction? To take it down, right? His attitude is, guys are suffering. Let's make sure they suffer in silence. Let's not deal with the suffering. You know, and people have a totally different attitude towards animals. You know, if some dog is abused to the point where it starts biting people, people don't say, put a muzzle on that dog and then ship him back to his abusive owner. They say, we have to separate this dog from that abusive owner. We got to stop animal abuse, right? So do you see the difference? People have more empathy for animals and pets than they do for young guys. And they have the same attitude for girls too, right? You know, there's all kinds of young women who act out and attack. But that's the attitude is different. Okay. Now we'll get ahead. Now, this is fictional right here.
Except Jones, and when a policeman enters, Decker attempts suicide by cop, yet survives, and in the final pages we are shown the consequences of Decker's actions in a report that states that he is seen as mentally unfit to stand trial at the given time, and is thus sent to a hospital for treatment.
See, that's fictional. They don't send young guys to mental hospitals when they commit these acts. They ship them to jail. As you guys know, if a young guy's schizophrenic and he commits a violent act, they ship him to jail. Men do not have an easy ride to the loony bin. They don't get a get out of jail free pass like the girls do. There's no postpartum depression card for guys to use. No. So King didn't realize or hid the fact that, that doesn't happen. Okay.
In the final lines, Decker writes from a psych ward, addressing the reader, penning the lines, "That's the end. I have to turn off the lights now. Good night."
The impact of rage. Well, actually, rage didn't make an impact, right? It was really a spark of something that was already there.
As Rage had been a Bachman release and not a King release, the sales of the book were next to none. Yet as Bachman began releasing more novels like The Long Walk, Road Work, and The Running Man.
By the way, The Long Walk, I just recently listened to that on audiobook. And The Long Walk was another story of abuse of teenage guys. It was a story about a marathon, which was a last man standing. The guys walked until there was only one left. And you know what? There were no young girl contestants in The Long Walk. It was all young guys. So Stephen King knows that young guys suffer in ways that the opposite sex doesn't.
He had developed somewhat of a cult following before being discovered in 1985. And once he was discovered for who he really was, people were eager to begin reading these new King novels that had been under their noses for the last 8 years. And that is when the incidents began to happen. There was something about Rage that identified with angsty high school students during the time, and it did not take long until Charlie Decker's fictional takeover of Placerville High had manifested itself onto the real world. The first incident occurred in April.
I'm going to get by the incidents because that's not what is important to me in this video. What's important to me is King's reaction to this, right? So let's get to the reaction.
King had only heard of the latter two incidents by the late 90s, but at that point it was enough to pull Rage off of the shelves, as all 4 examples, once they had been investigated on, as King would later find out in regard to the former 2, had been connected to Rage in one way or another. Some, such as Joe Cox and Dustin L. Pierce, were inspired in a broader sense, and in that I mean to just shoot up a school. Yet the second to last example, Barry Lukatis, had parroted Decker in many ways during his shooting spree. Regardless, all 4 had been found to have...
Does it look like this guy's been sent to the loony bin? No, he's being sent to jail.
Rage either in their locker or at home, and that was what sealed the deal for King. Yet King did not take any personal responsibility for the shootings.
That's for sure. He's going to admit openly that his book is not responsible, yet he's taking his book down, right? So he goes one step beyond. King is actually part of the problem now. If he wanted to be a part of the solution, he would deny responsibility because he isn't and leave the book up, right? But his book is exposing a serious issue for young guys. And what's his attitude? Let them suffer. Let's not deal with the core issue.
As he would later elaborate on in his 2012 essay Guns, in which he dedicates a portion of it to Rage, the incidents connected with it, and its subsequent removal. In this portion, King explains how the main issue of all 4 incidents stem from neglect and/or abuse from the parents of these kids who committed these acts.
They all stem from neglect or abuse from the kids' parents. So that's the issue. It's not toxic masculinity. It's young people being abused by their parents. So it's an abuse. So since this novel is highlighting this issue, what's he want to do? He wants to bury it.
Not his book. Yet he does show a responsibility for his work and its potential impact on the youth, in which he perfectly articulates in this quote.
No, he didn't show responsibility, pal, because he banned his own book.
My book did not break Cox, Pierce, Carneal, or Lukaitis, or turn them into killers. They found something in my book that spoke to them because they were already broken. Yet I did see Rage as a possible accelerant, which is why I pulled it from sale. You don't leave a can of gasoline where a boy with firebug tendencies can lay hands on it.
See how his analogy is off. It's victim blaming. Boys with firebug tendencies. They don't have firebug tendencies. These boys are the gasoline. They are the cans of gasoline. And it didn't start off that way. They started off as water. They were converted into gasoline by their parents. Right. His book was the accelerant. That's where he was right about that. So, like I say, what's his attitude? Rather than converting water into gasoline, let's just keep the accelerants away, right? Dogs are being abused by their owners. Let's not separate them from their owners. Let's just put muzzles on them so they can't bite people, right? Let the boys suffer silently. And that's why I say King is a part of the problem, right? Now, one last thing, because a couple of the guys, right, in my Discord suggested that King might have taken it down because he was pressured from outside. Like maybe he was suffering cancellation, which I doubt because, or I know it isn't the case, but just look, they should know better anyway, because the Joker movie exposed the same ills for men even better than King. And this movie was not banned from theaters, was it? Right. But just to make sure, here's a guy saying so himself.
To clarify what happened next, Rage was never banned, there were no legal obligations, there was no real public outcry.
There you go. It was not banned by other people, there was no legal obligations, and there was no public outcry. So King did this on his own. Okay, guys? And that's why this is important to me, right? It's important to me because guys like King are a part of the problem. They are not a part of the solution, right? And he's not neutral. By banning his own book, he is willing to say, let young guys suffer. My answer is for these young guys to just suffer in silence. Something that we don't hold for girls or pets, okay? So, King, I know you'll never hear this, but I'm saying it anyway. I'm calling you out. You do hold a responsibility. And you were irresponsible when you banned your own book because it was necessary. It exposes this problem. And that's what I have to say about this.